I never expected a certified letter to change my life, but there it was in my mailbox, the beginning of a nightmare that would eventually become my sweetest revenge. Notice of demolition. It read in bold, officious type. Property at 1478 Lakeview Drive, Lake Geneva, Wisconsin, found in violation of Shoreline Heights HOA code regulations. My grandfather's cottage. The place where I'd spent every summer of my childhood. The last connection I had to him. I stood on my apartment balcony in Chicago, staring at the paper in disbelief. According to this notice, I had 30 days to address a list of so-called critical violations or face potential enforcement actions, including demolition. Demolition. They couldn't be serious. The cottage wasn't perfect. It was over 60 years old, but it was structurally sound and well-maintained. I'd inherited it 3 years ago after Grandpa George passed, and while I only visited on weekends and holidays, I kept it in good condition. My name is Gabriel Morrison, Gabe to my friends. At 34, I work as a structural engineer for a mid-sized firm in Chicago. I'm methodical, practical, and generally not someone who loses his temper easily. But this letter had my blood boiling. I called the number listed for the Shoreline Heights HOA immediately. Shoreline Heights Homeowners Association, this is Patricia. How may I help you? The voice was artificially cheerful. Yes, I'm calling about a demolition notice I received for my property on Lakeview Drive. Oh, you must be Mr. Morrison. Yes, we've been trying to reach you about your violations for some time. This is the first notice I've received, I said, keeping my voice level despite my rising irritation. Well, we've sent several letters over the past 6 months. Perhaps you should update your mailing address. The condescension in her voice was unmistakable. I've received all my regular mail and property tax bills without issue. What exactly are these violations? Patricia sighed as if explaining something to a child. Your cottage fails to meet our updated community aesthetic standards. The exterior is rustic, to put it kindly. The color scheme doesn't conform to our approved palette, and the landscaping is woefully inadequate, not to mention the non-regulation dock. Non-regulation dock. That dock has been there for decades. Yes, well, regulations change, Mr. Morrison. The HOA board approved new community standards last year. All waterfront properties must comply. I was never informed of any changes, and I never agreed to join your HOA. There was a pause on the line. Mr. Morrison, all properties in Shoreline Heights are automatically subject to HOA governance. It's in the community charter. Now, if you'd like to discuss how to bring your property into compliance, I'd be happy to schedule a consultation with our architectural review committee. I gripped the phone tighter. I'll need to see documentation proving my property falls under your jurisdiction. Of course, you can find everything on our website. Now, our committee meets next Thursday at 7 p.m. if you'd like to present your improvement plans. I ended the call and immediately booked the next day off work. I needed to see the cottage for myself and sort this out in person. The 3-hour drive from Chicago to Lake Geneva usually cleared my head, but today, my mind raced with questions. My grandfather had purchased this land in the 1950s, long before HOAs became common. He'd built the cottage himself, a sturdy 2-bedroom with knotty pine walls and a stone fireplace that had weathered decades of Wisconsin winters. As I turned onto Lakeview Drive, I noticed something I hadn't paid attention to before: new signage welcoming visitors to Shoreline Heights, a premier lake community. The sign looked recent, with crisp gold lettering on a dark green background. My cottage sat at the end of a winding gravel drive, partially hidden by mature oak and maple trees. It was a simple frame structure with large windows facing the lake, a wide deck wrapping around two sides, and weather-worn cedar siding that had aged to a silvery gray. To me, it was perfect a testament to my grandfather's craftsmanship and vision. I parked and immediately noticed a bright orange notice stapled to the front door. Violation, it screamed in large black letters. I ripped it down and unlocked the door, tossing my overnight bag on the worn leather couch. The interior was exactly as I'd left it after my last visit 2 months ago, clean but modest, with vintage furniture and family photos covering the pine-paneled walls. Through the large windows, I could see the lake sparkling in the afternoon sun, my grandfather's hand-built dock extending into the water. After settling in, I walked the property perimeter. Everything seemed in good order, though I noticed new construction about a quarter-mile down the shoreline, what appeared to be a large clubhouse with an expansive deck and boathouse. That hadn't been there last summer. I decided to visit the HOA office directly. According to their website, they were located in a newly renovated building near the lake's public access point. The Shoreline Heights HOA headquarters turned out to be a stylish converted boathouse with floor-to-ceiling windows and sleek modern furniture. Inside, a receptionist with an immaculate blonde bob looked up as I entered. "Welcome to Shoreline Heights HOA. How can I assist you today?" Her nameplate read, "Pamela Brennan, Administrative Director." "I'm Gabriel Morrison. I own the cottage at 1478 Lakeview Drive, and I received a demolition notice. I'd like to speak with whoever's in charge." Pamela's smile tightened. "Of course. That would be our board president, Mrs. Karen Whitfield. Let me see if she's available." While Pamela made a call, I examined the framed photos on the wall before and after shots of lakefront properties. The after images all featured nearly identical houses, large Hampton-style homes with neutral exteriors, manicured lawns, and identical boat docks. "Mr. Morrison." A sharp voice interrupted my thoughts. I turned to find a woman in her 50s with highlighted blonde hair cut in an angled bob, wearing a cream-colored blazer with a gold SH pin on the lapel. "I'm Karen Whitfield, president of the Shoreline Heights Homeowners Association." Her smile didn't reach her eyes. "I understand you have some questions about your property violations." "Yes, starting with why I'm only hearing about these violations now and why demolition is even being considered." Karen gestured toward a conference room. "Let's discuss this privately." Once seated at a glossy table with lake views, Karen opened a leather portfolio. "Mr. Morrison, your property has been flagged for multiple violations of our community standards. The cottage's exterior is visibly deteriorating, the color scheme is non-compliant, and the dock doesn't meet our safety specifications." "The cottage is structurally sound," I countered. "I'm a structural engineer and I can assure you there are no safety issues. Perhaps in your opinion. But our Architectural Review Committee has determined otherwise. More importantly, your property significantly detracts from community aesthetics and property values." I leaned forward. "I never agreed to join your HOA. My grandfather purchased that land outright in 1956. Karen's smile was condescending. The Shoreline Heights HOA was established in 2020 when the majority of property owners voted to incorporate. Under Wisconsin law, once 75% of property owners agree, all properties within the designated boundaries are subject to association governance. I never received notice of any vote. Notices were sent to all property owners of record." She slid a document across the table. "This is a copy of our community charter and bylaws. You'll find all the legal documentation there." I glanced at the thick document. "And if I refuse to comply?" Her expression hardened. Then we proceed with enforcement actions, which can include fines, liens, and eventually, removal of non-compliant structures. You can't legally demolish my property. Actually, we can. Section 8.3 of the bylaws outlines our enforcement powers. The courts have consistently upheld HOA authority in similar cases. She closed her portfolio. However, we prefer cooperation. Our community vision is to create a premier lakefront destination with consistent upscale aesthetics. Your cottage, while charming in its own way, simply doesn't align with that vision. I felt my face growing hot. This cottage has been in my family for 3 generations. It has historical and personal significance. I understand sentiment, Mr. Morrison, but progress requires change. We've recently completed our beach club and marina facilities, a $5 million investment that benefits all residents. Your cooperation in maintaining community standards protects everyone's property values. Where is this beach club located? Just down the shore from your property. We acquired the land last year and broke ground in April. It's a wonderful addition: private beach, boat slips, a restaurant, and social spaces. She smiled proudly. We're having our grand opening gala next Saturday. Something didn't add up. My grandfather's property extended quite a way along the shoreline. I needed to check the exact boundaries. I'll review your documentation, I said, standing up. But don't expect me to demolish my cottage anytime soon. Karen's smile vanished. You have 28 days to submit plans for either bringing the structure into compliance or replacing it with an approved design. After that, daily fines of $500 will be assessed, and the demolition process will begin. We'll see about that, I said, taking the bylaws and walking out. Back at the cottage, I spent the evening reviewing the HOA documentation. It appeared legitimate at first glance: professionally drafted legal language establishing the association's authority, voting procedures, and enforcement powers. But I couldn't shake the feeling something was wrong. The next morning, I drove to the Walworth County Records office to check the property records. The clerk, an older woman named Dorothy, recognized my last name immediately. Morrison. Any relation to George Morrison? He was my grandfather. I inherited his lake property. Her face brightened. Oh, I remember George well. Such a gentleman. He used to bring coffee and donuts whenever he came in to pay his taxes. You look like him around the eyes. I smiled, grateful for the connection. I'm trying to clarify some boundary issues with my property. The HOA is claiming jurisdiction, but I'm not convinced. Dorothy frowned. HOA. There wasn't any homeowners association when your grandfather was alive. That's what I thought. Apparently they formed in 2020. She nodded. Let me pull up the records for you. After some clicking and scrolling, Dorothy turned her monitor so I could see. Here's the original deed from 1956 when George purchased from the Alderson family. 5 acres with 287 feet of lake frontage. She pointed to a property survey. The northern boundary runs from this marker at the road all the way down to this point on the shoreline. I studied the survey carefully, then pulled out my phone and opened the map the HOA had included in their documentation. According to their map, my property was much smaller, barely an acre with only 75 feet of lake frontage. This can't be right, I said, showing Dorothy the HOA map. They've redrawn the boundaries. Dorothy adjusted her glasses and compared the maps. That's concerning. Let me check something. She typed rapidly, then frowned deeper. According to our records, there was never a legal replatting of your grandfather's parcel. The property boundaries should be exactly as they were when you inherited it. Can I get official copies of these documents? Absolutely. I'll print everything. We have the original deeds, surveys, and property tax history. As Dorothy gathered the documents, I asked, "What about the land just south of my property? Who owns that now?" She checked her records again. "That's listed as owned by Shoreline Heights Community Association as of January 2021. They purchased it from the Taylor estate." I froze. "How far does that property extend north?" She showed me on the screen. "It begins at the southern boundary of your property, right here." The realization hit me like a thunderbolt. If my property boundaries were correct and the county records confirmed they were, then the new beach club was partially built on my land. I thanked Dorothy and left with a thick folder of documentation, my mind racing. This wasn't just about my cottage anymore. The HOA had either deliberately misrepresented my property boundaries or made a catastrophic error. Rather than confronting Karen immediately, I decided to get professional confirmation. I called my friend Patrick Weber, a land surveyor I'd worked with on several projects. "Pat, I need a huge favor. How quickly can you come to Lake Geneva and survey a property for you? I could be there tomorrow afternoon if it's important." "It's important. I think an HOA is trying to steal part of my land." Patrick arrived the next day with his equipment, and we spent hours walking the property lines, checking the original survey markers and taking precise measurements. By sunset, he confirmed what I already suspected. "Gabe, according to the original survey markers, your property is exactly as described in the 1956 deed. 5 acres with 287 feet of lake frontage." He pointed toward the new beach club. "And about a third of that building is definitely on your land." I felt a strange mixture of anger and vindication. So they're trying to force me out to cover up the fact that they built on my property. Looks that way. Could be an honest mistake, but... Patrick shrugged. "But demolishing my cottage without proper authority doesn't seem like an honest mistake response," I finished. "What are you going to do?" I stared at the beach club in the distance, its large windows reflecting the setting sun. "I'm going to need a good lawyer." I returned to Chicago the next day and contacted Olivia Chen, a college friend who specialized in real estate law. After explaining the situation and sending her the documentation, she agreed to take my case. "This is pretty egregious, Gabe," she said during our consultation. "If the survey confirms the HOA built on your land without permission, you have a very strong case for trespassing and illegal construction at minimum. What about their demolition threat? Based on what you've shown me, they can't legally demolish your cottage. First, it's questionable whether your property is actually subject to the HOA at all, given the discrepancy in property records. Second, even if it were, demolition is an extreme remedy that would require court approval, which they don't have. So what's our next move?" "I'll draft a cease and desist letter regarding both the demolition threat and the encroachment. We'll demand they halt any enforcement actions against your property and address the beach club trespass immediately." "And if they ignore it," Olivia leaned forward, "then we file for an emergency injunction and potentially a lawsuit for damages. But let's start with the letter. Sometimes just letting them know you have legal representation is enough to change the conversation." The cease and desist letter went out the next day by certified mail. I expected it would take the HOA a few days to respond, but Karen Whitfield called me directly that same evening. "Mr. Morrison," she began, her voice icy, "I've received a rather aggressive letter from your attorney containing some outlandish claims." "They're not claims, Mrs. Whitfield. They're facts supported by county records and a professional survey. Our development team thoroughly vetted all property boundaries before construction began," she insisted. "Your grandfather's original parcel was subdivided years ago. There's no record of any legal subdivision at the county office." A brief silence. There must be some misunderstanding. Our legal team will review your concerns, but in the meantime, your compliance deadline remains in effect. If a single person sets foot on my property with demolition equipment, I'll have them arrested for trespassing and destruction of property, I warned. Threats are unnecessary, Mr. Morrison. We're simply enforcing our community standards. No, you're trying to cover up the fact that you built your precious beach club partly on my land. Tell me, did you deliberately misrepresent my property boundaries, or was it incompetence? Another pause, longer this time. I think this conversation has become unproductive. Our respective legal teams should handle this matter going forward. She hung up. I immediately called Olivia to update her. They're not backing down. Karen claims the land was subdivided, but there's no record at the county office. Interesting, Olivia said. Let me do some digging into when and how this HOA was formed. Something doesn't add up. For the next week, I tried to focus on work while Olivia investigated. She hired a private investigator to research the HOA's formation and the beach club development. 10 days after our initial letter, Olivia called with news. Gabe, we found something significant. The HOA was indeed formed in 2020, but the documentation they filed with the state includes a property map that differs from county records. Essentially, they created their own map that conveniently reduced your property size and expanded what they could purchase from the Taylor estate. That can't be legal. It's not. And there's more. We've obtained emails between Karen Whitfield and the developer showing they were aware of potential boundary issues but proceeded anyway, assuming you were an absentee owner who wouldn't notice. My blood boiled. They deliberately stole my land. It appears so. And now they're trying to force you out to eliminate the evidence. I'm preparing court filings for an emergency injunction against any demolition activity and a separate action regarding the encroachment. How soon can we file? Tomorrow morning. I've already scheduled an emergency hearing for Friday. What do you need from me? Be ready to appear in court. And Gabe, don't engage with the HOA directly anymore. Let me handle all communications. I agreed, but fate had other plans. The very next morning, my phone rang with a call from my nearest neighbor at the lake, Harold Jefferson. Gabe, you need to get up here right now, Harold said, his voice urgent. There are bulldozers at your cottage. What? That's impossible. We haven't even had the hearing yet. Well, someone didn't get the memo. They're tearing down your deck right now. I called Olivia while simultaneously booking an Uber to Union Station for the next train to Wisconsin. They're demolishing my cottage right now. What? They can't do that without a court order. Tell that to the bulldozers. My neighbor just called. I'm calling the Walworth County Sheriff immediately. Get there as fast as you can and document everything. Take videos, photos, witnesses, anything we can use in court. The 3-hour journey to Lake Geneva was the longest of my life. I kept calling Harold for updates, each one worse than the last. By the time my Uber from the train station turned onto Lakeview Drive, Harold reported that the main structure was being torn down. Nothing prepared me for the sight that greeted me. My grandfather's cottage, the place where I'd learned to fish, where I'd spent countless evenings by the fireplace listening to his stories, was now a pile of splintered wood and broken glass. A large yellow excavator was pushing the debris into a dumpster while a group of workers cleared the site. I spotted Karen Whitfield standing nearby with a man in a hard hat, looking at blueprints spread on the hood of a luxury SUV. Rage coursed through me as I stormed toward them. What the hell do you think you're doing? Karen turned, momentarily startled before composing herself. Mr. Morrison, as you can see, we're enforcing our community standards. You have no legal right to demolish my property. We have a court hearing scheduled for Friday. We received no notice of any hearing, she said coolly. And our bylaws clearly authorize removal of non-compliant structures after the notice period expires. This is criminal destruction of property, and you're building on land that doesn't belong to you. I pulled out my phone and began recording. I want everyone off my property right now, or I'm calling the sheriff. The sheriff is already aware of our enforcement action, Karen replied, though her confidence seemed to waver slightly. We filed the appropriate notices. Lying won't help you, Karen. I've seen the property records. I know what you did. The man in the hard hat looked confused. Mrs. Whitfield, is there a problem with the permits? Everything is in order, Frank. Mr. Morrison is simply upset about losing his outdated cottage. She turned back to me. You'll thank us when your property value triples with a new, compliant structure. At that moment, 2 sheriff's department vehicles pulled up, lights flashing. Olivia must have gotten through. A tall officer approached us while his partner began talking to the construction crew. I'm Deputy Ramirez. We received a complaint about illegal demolition activity. That would be my complaint, I said, stepping forward. I'm Gabriel Morrison, the property owner. These people are demolishing my cottage without legal authority. Karen interjected smoothly. Deputy, we have full authorization under our HOA bylaws. Mr. Morrison's property was in violation of community standards, and he failed to comply with multiple notices. Deputy Ramirez looked between us. Madam, HOA bylaws don't override state property laws. Do you have a court order for this demolition? We don't need one. Our bylaws, madam, the deputy interrupted. Without a court order, this constitutes illegal destruction of property. I'll need to see permits and authorization documentation immediately. While Karen nervously dug through her portfolio, I showed Deputy Ramirez the property records and survey results on my phone. They're also building their beach club partially on my land. I have the county records and a recent professional survey to prove it. The deputy reviewed the information, then turned to the construction crew. All demolition activity stops right now. Everyone needs to clear the site while we sort this out. The foreman immediately signaled for his workers to shut down their equipment. Karen protested, "This is outrageous. We have full authority under our community governance documents." Madam, those documents don't supersede state law, Deputy Ramirez repeated firmly. If you can't produce a court order authorizing demolition of a private residence, then this activity is illegal. While the second deputy took statements from the construction workers, Deputy Ramirez continued questioning Karen and me. When he learned that a court hearing was already scheduled regarding the property dispute, he shook his head in disbelief. So you proceeded with demolition knowing there was a pending legal action? He asked Karen. We were never served with any notice of a hearing, Karen insisted. The court confirmed delivery of the notice yesterday, I countered, showing the tracking confirmation Olivia had sent me. Deputy Ramirez sighed. Mrs. Whitfield, I'm going to need you to come to the station to provide a formal statement. This is potentially criminal property damage and could involve additional charges if we confirm the boundary dispute. Karen's face paled. I need to call our attorney. That would be advisable, the deputy agreed. As Karen made her call, I surveyed the devastation. The cottage was completely destroyed. 60 years of family history reduced to a jumble of broken timber and shattered glass. Tears stung my eyes despite my efforts to maintain composure. Deputy Ramirez noticed. I'm sorry about your property, sir. We'll document everything for your insurance and any legal action you pursue. Thank you. What happens now? We'll file a report and likely forward this to the district attorney for potential criminal charges. You should contact your insurance company immediately and preserve any documentation about the property's value and condition before demolition. My phone rang. It was Olivia. Gabe, what's happening? Are the police there? I updated her on the situation, and she was furious. This changes everything. We're adding destruction of property, criminal trespass, and potentially racketeering charges to our lawsuit. I'm contacting the judge to move up our hearing to tomorrow morning given this development. Can you stay in Wisconsin? I'm not going anywhere until this is resolved, I assured her. After providing my statement to the deputies, I stood watching as they escorted Karen to their vehicle for further questioning at the station. The construction crew packed up their equipment, looking uncomfortable and confused. Harold approached and put a hand on my shoulder. I'm so sorry, Gabe. This is unbelievable. Thanks for calling me, Harold. Did you happen to take any photos before I got here? Better than that, he said, holding up his phone. I got video of the whole thing from when they first arrived. They didn't even give proper notice, just showed up with equipment this morning and started tearing it down. I could have hugged him. Harold, you're a lifesaver. Can you send me those videos right away? My attorney will need them. Already done. I sent them while the police were talking to you. That night, I stayed with Harold and his wife, unable to face getting a hotel room. I was emotionally exhausted but also filled with resolve. This wasn't just about my cottage anymore, it was about justice and preventing the HOA from bullying other property owners. Olivia called early the next morning. Great news! The judge was appalled by the HOA's actions and has granted us an emergency hearing this afternoon at 2 p.m. I'm driving up now and will meet you at the courthouse at 1 p.m. to review our strategy. The Walworth County Courthouse was an imposing limestone building in Elkhorn, about 20 minutes from Lake Geneva. I arrived early and waited on a bench outside, still processing the loss of my cottage while trying to focus on the legal battle ahead. Olivia arrived precisely at 1 p.m., looking every bit the formidable attorney in a charcoal suit and carrying a leather briefcase. How are you holding up? Still in shock but ready to fight, I replied. Good, because we're going to hit them hard. She opened her briefcase and spread out documents. I've prepared motions for immediate injunctive relief to prevent any further action on your property, a separate motion regarding the beach club encroachment, and we're seeking punitive damages for the illegal demolition. What about criminal charges? The DA is reviewing the sheriff's report. Based on what I've heard, charges are likely against both the HOA and potentially Karen Whitfield personally. We reviewed our strategy until it was time for the hearing. Inside the courtroom, I was surprised to see not only Karen Whitfield and an attorney I assumed represented the HOA, but also several other people I recognized as Shoreline Heights residents. Judge Patricia Hernandez called the court to order promptly at 2 p.m. After introductions, she addressed the attorneys. Counselors, this is an emergency hearing regarding what appears to be a significant property dispute involving unauthorized demolition. Ms. Chen, as you filed the emergency motion, please proceed. Olivia presented our case methodically, displaying county records, survey results, and Harold's videos of the demolition. She explained how the HOA had apparently redrawn property boundaries without legal authority and then built their beach club partially on my land. When they realized their mistake, they attempted to force me out by fabricating violations and ultimately demolishing my cottage, despite pending legal proceedings. The HOA's attorney, a sharp-dressed man introduced as Jeffrey Parker, countered that the HOA had acted within its authority and claimed there was documentation showing my grandfather had agreed to a property subdivision years ago. Judge Hernandez was skeptical. Mr. Parker, if such documentation exists, why wasn't it recorded with the county? Your Honor, we believe it was an administrative oversight. The HOA recently discovered these documents in their archives. Olivia pounced. Your Honor, the HOA didn't exist until 2020, over 60 years after Mr. Morrison's grandfather purchased the property. What archives could possibly contain unrecorded property transactions from the 1950s? Judge Hernandez turned to Karen. Mrs. Whitfield, you're under oath. When exactly did the HOA discover these alleged documents? Karen shifted uncomfortably. We found them during the due diligence process for the beach club development. And you didn't think it necessary to record them with the county or formally notify Mr. Morrison of this discovery. We sent multiple notices about his violations, Karen insisted. That's not what I asked, the judge said sharply. Did you formally notify him about this alleged subdivision of his property? Not specifically, no. Judge Hernandez frowned. Mr. Parker, I'd like to see these documents immediately. The attorney hesitated. We don't have them with us today, Your Honor. You came to an emergency hearing about property boundaries without the documents that supposedly justify your client's actions. The judge's tone was incredulous. We can provide them at a later date, Parker offered weakly. Miss Chen, does your client have any independent knowledge of his grandfather ever agreeing to subdivide this property? None whatsoever, Your Honor, and the county has no record of any subdivision. After considering all the evidence, Judge Hernandez issued her ruling. Based on the evidence presented, I find that the Shoreline Heights HOA has failed to demonstrate legal authority to demolish Mr. Morrison's property. I'm issuing an immediate injunction prohibiting any further action on Mr. Morrison's land, as defined by the county records and recent survey. She continued, regarding the beach club encroachment, I'm ordering the HOA to cease all operations of that facility until property boundaries can be conclusively established. If, as the evidence suggests, the facility is partially on Mr. Morrison's land, the HOA will need to either remove the encroaching portions or negotiate a purchase or easement with Mr. Morrison. Karen gasped audibly, and murmurs ran through the courtroom. Furthermore, the judge added, I'm referring this matter to the district attorney for potential criminal investigation regarding the unauthorized demolition. Mr. Morrison is entitled to seek damages, which will be addressed in a separate hearing. We'll reconvene in 2 weeks to assess compliance with today's orders and address the boundary dispute conclusively. As we left the courtroom, several Shoreline Heights residents approached me. We had no idea this was happening, said an older gentleman who introduced himself as Robert Turner. The board never informed us they were demolishing your cottage, or that there were questions about the beach club location, added a woman named Margaret. We've been paying special assessments for that facility for months. It seemed the HOA board had kept the other homeowners in the dark about their actions. I gave them my contact information and suggested they might want to attend the next hearing. Over the next 2 weeks, the situation exploded. Local media picked up the story, HOA demolishes cottage, builds beach club on owner's land, made headlines in the Lake Geneva Regional News. Several HOA members contacted me to express their outrage and share their own negative experiences with Karen's leadership. The district attorney filed criminal charges against Karen Whitfield for destruction of property, criminal trespass, and fraud. 2 other board members were charged as co-conspirators. My insurance company initiated their own investigation and lawsuit against the HOA for the cottage's value. Olivia's private investigator uncovered even more damning evidence. Email exchanges between Karen and the developer revealed they had deliberately misrepresented property lines to reduce costs and had specifically targeted my cottage because it disrupted the visual continuity of their lakefront aesthetic. They had gambled that as a part-time resident, I wouldn't have the resources or determination to fight back. When we returned to court 2 weeks later, the HOA had a new attorney. Karen Whitfield was noticeably absent, having been advised by her criminal defense attorney not to attend. Judge Hernandez reviewed the evidence, including county records, my professional survey, and the HOA's still missing documentation of the alleged subdivision. The court finds that the property boundaries as recorded with Walworth County are legally binding, she declared. Mr. Morrison's land extends to the original survey markers, which means approximately 1/3 of the Shoreline Heights Beach Club is indeed on his property without authorization. She ordered the HOA to either remove the encroaching portions of the building within 90 days or negotiate a fair purchase or lease agreement with me. Additionally, she ruled that my property was not subject to HOA governance since it predated the association's formation and had been incorrectly included in their jurisdiction. As for damages, the judge awarded me the full replacement value of my cottage, plus additional punitive damages for the HOA's willful and malicious actions. The total came to just over $1.2 million. Outside the courthouse, Olivia was jubilant. "This is a complete victory, Gabe. Not only did we stop them from taking your land, but you've been awarded substantial damages, and the HOA has no authority over your property." "What about the beach club?" I asked. "That's entirely up to you now. They either have to tear down the encroaching portion or make a deal with you to keep it there. You have all the leverage." I stared at the courthouse steps, thinking about my grandfather and what he would do in this situation. George Morrison had always been fair but firm. He believed in standing your ground, but not in seeking revenge for its own sake. The criminal case against Karen Whitfield and the other board members proceeded separately. Karen ultimately pleaded guilty to reduced charges of criminal damage to property and fraud, receiving 2 years of probation, a substantial fine, and 500 hours of community service. She was also barred from serving on any HOA board in the future. The other board members received similar but lesser penalties based on their level of involvement. The HOA itself underwent a complete restructuring. The remaining board members resigned, and a new board was elected with a mandate for transparency and fairness. They approached me with hat in hand, asking to negotiate a solution for the beach club. "We're deeply sorry for what happened," said the new board president, Thomas Callaghan. "The previous leadership acted unconscionably. We're hoping to find a solution that respects your property rights while allowing the community to preserve the facility we've invested in." I considered my options carefully. I could force them to tear down the encroaching portion, which would likely bankrupt the HOA and harm many innocent homeowners. I could sell them the land at an exorbitant price, or I could find a middle path. "Here's my proposal," I finally said. "I'll lease the land to the HOA for $1 per year, with 2 conditions. First, membership in the beach club must be open to all lakefront property owners, not just Shoreline Heights residents. Second, you'll rename it the George Morrison Memorial Beach Club in honor of my grandfather." Thomas looked surprised. "That's incredibly generous. Are you sure?" "I'm sure. My grandfather believed in community. He'd want the lake to be enjoyed by as many people as possible." We finalized the agreement, and I used the damage award to build a new cottage similar to my grandfather's in style, but updated and slightly larger. The HOA, under its new leadership, established fair and transparent processes for all residents. Karen Whitfield sold her lake house and moved away, her reputation in the community irreparably damaged. Several residents later told me she had been terrorizing homeowners for years with arbitrary rule enforcement and excessive fines. A year after the demolition, I stood on the deck of my new cottage, watching the sunset over Lake Geneva. The George Morrison Memorial Beach Club was visible down the shore, now with a tasteful sign bearing my grandfather's name. Families were enjoying the beach, and boats were coming and going from the docks. Harold joined me with 2 beers, handing me one. "Quite a view, isn't it?" "It is," I agreed, taking a sip. "Grandpa would have liked seeing people enjoying the lake like this." "You know, you could have taken them to the cleaners, made millions on that land." I shook my head. Money wasn't the point, justice was, and making sure no HOA board ever thinks they can bully someone like that again. Harold raised his bottle. "To George Morrison, who taught his grandson well." "To Grandpa," I said, clinking bottles, "and to standing your ground." The lake sparkled in the fading light, and I felt a profound sense of peace. The cottage was gone, but something more important had been preserved: the values my grandfather had instilled in me, and his vision of what this special place should be. Sometimes justice comes in unexpected ways. I had lost my cottage, but gained something more valuable: the knowledge that I had honored my grandfather's legacy by standing up to bullies, and then choosing compassion over revenge. In the end, that was worth more than any lakefront property.